Hello my friends on the internet, Brian here. Thanks for joining me for another of my video experiments trying to make an Automail glove, Gauntlet. Made this guy, made the symbol, need to refine the symbol a little bit better, the transmutation circle. Last time I made the cardboard outline for the Gauntlet, but used a plastic bag as my surrogate glove. I had a better idea of how to actually do that, and involves a sock that I no longer care about. And this is a much better idea than using a plastic bag that I faked. Because I can do the same thing with the sock that I could do with the glove. I'm just going to cut the tip off this here and use this sock and actually glue some versions of this to my arm, to the sock, and I'm probably going to run it through the aluminum tape as well, so that at the end of it I'll have a glove and a former sock gauntlet piece. So that shouldn't take too long, so hopefully this is going to be a little quick one. I'm going to duplicate these to make a little bit bigger, so I'm not going to be using these specific ones. I'm going to be doing a new version of them, but basically the same. I'm literally going to be tracing them as you shall see. The gloves have arrived. They're a little bit smaller than I wanted them to be. Just to throw that out here. It's also amazing how one feminine glove can completely change your dynamic of your arm. Anyway, it looks weird to me. My fingers don't quite go all the way up to the tip of the glove. But for my purpose, it's going to be just fine. It's longer than I need it to be, so in the middle, I'm going to scrunch it up like this when I glue the final versions of these plates on, so that the scrunchy bit won't be seen. And as I said in the last video, it's going to be, a stripe there, and these guys here taped around. You'll see on the sock what I'm planning on doing. But I can work with this glove. It's alright. The foam. I am currently in the midst of experiments, seeing how I can change the back texture of this, because I'm still not 100% sure how it's going to react when I paint it, which is why I've split up a section into 10 or so, I think 11, because I numbered them, individual pieces. On the back of a few of them, I've sanded the back down to try and make it as smooth as possible. I'm leaving one stack completely unaffected, unchanged. On one of them, just because I didn't expect it to work, I only did it on one of them, I just put super glue down and smeared it across. And yeah, it looked like crap, and when I tried bending it a little bit, it immediately cracked hideously, so super glue is not the option. The current forerunner seems to be floor polish, which I use in a number of different things to tighten joints and such, and to protect things. Like if I'm painting something, like this transformer I painted, I use floor polish as a sealer to protect it from chipping and flaking. It ends up having a smooth surface. So I decided to try some of that on the foam to see how that behaves and if I can get a smooth metallic-like surface on it. And it passed the can I bend it a little bit test. And yeah, I can bend it just fine. It's not going to shatter on me and crack hideously. I've got a few different amounts of thicknesses that I'm playing with, but those are going interestingly. The next step for those guys is to, at some point in the not too distant future, take them outside and spray paint them to see how they react with the paint in conjunction with the things I've done on them. For the rest of the Full Metal Alchemist costume, that is just going to be bought online. There are people on eBay that are selling costumes of state alchemists. I'm just going to order one from them because they look good enough and better than what I can do. Because I am not I know seamstress is a female for female form. I do not know the male form of Taylor, maybe? Anyway. Now begins the hour of my now begins the experimenting. So I begin where I said I would. I cut off the tip of the sock. I intentionally go high on the cut because I can always take off more if I need to. And now I've got a sock on my arm. Now to copy my templates again by tracing them. The reason I'm making new versions is mostly to be redundant. I prefer not to use the original of something in case I need to start over. Trying to bend it again. I could score this to bend it, but I'm experimenting with trying to get a more natural curve. For the top panel, I wanted to go back to the drawing board. It wasn't big enough. And this piece of paper I grabbed looked like it might have been the paper template for the bottom piece. I decided to use it, and if it's too big, I can cut it down later. I'm bending the top part as tightly as possible. I had much better results going as tightly as I could than as gently as I could. Trying to decide where to glue it and to see how it reacts to the superglue. With the sock at least, I didn't have any problems with the glue attaching to my skin, but I was still concerned about it. I decided to worst case it and conduct an experiment. I put a strip of cardboard inside and will glue the hell out of the bottom piece. I give it a moment to dry, and it emerges completely unaffected. So, for the socket seams, glue is not going to be an issue. I still don't want to have my arm in there so that I can use both hands. I put some scrap in there to protect the sock from being glued to each other, then start applying liberal amounts of superglue to secure the bottom. I do a stripe at a time essentially. And now that bottle is spent. It wasn't fresh though, so I expected to finish it off. I cut off the corners of the scrap to prevent it from catching when I move it around inside the sock. I decide to be a little more stingy with the glue. I get concerned that gluing it while flat won't work out well since it's supposed to be a curved shape, so I put my arm back into it. This turned out to be a wise idea as when I do so, I pop some of the glue points apart. So I definitely needed to glue the bottom piece around a curve. I reinsert the cardboard scrap, off camera for some reason, just in case. So much for being stingy with the glue. Brian. Get into frame, dingus. Sorry guys, I'm just curving the cardboard. Wow, I already drained this fresh bottle of glue. I'll go into this later, but I get ahead of myself here big time. Before I started gluing, I should have used the aluminum tape to make these pieces of cardboard look like metal, but I didn't think about it until much later. I got a bit of glue on the outside of the gauntlet, so I used a piece of scrap to clean it up. Now I'm just fixing the edges, trying to make them as tight as possible. I even forget that I needed the strip for the center, so I have to make that quickly. Put my guard scrap back in. Back to being stingy with the glue now that I use an entire bottle on the bottom. The sock is bunching up around my wrist, so I decide it's time to shorten it. Again, fixing the edges. Time to move on to the top. I need my elbow curve, so I grab my template and trace the cut. But I feel my new piece is a little too big, so I cut off its side. I was wrong and will later be gluing that bit back on. Then I roll it up to curve it again. Now I glue the top part to the strip I glued to the sock itself. I eyeballed this and it didn't line up at all, so I ripped it up. As I'm strategizing, I'm realizing that it actually isn't wide enough, and I shouldn't have cut that strip off the side. I decided to glue the top in just one segment at a time to make sure the angles I'm dealing with will line up. The corner in the box that this used to be is actually being useful to help me glue the rest. Letting the glue dry a moment. And even being careful, I realize it's just too thin. I take it off and glue the strip back on after I attempt to put a curve in it. After gluing the strip back on, I did some trim work on the whole thing to make the edges line up a little better. And at this point, I now realize that I should have used the aluminum tape before gluing. I debate how I want to go about this. I would have done long vertical stripes as opposed to short horizontal ones, but since I've already glued it, the short ones are easier. Just like the other stuff I've done, I gauge how long each piece needs to be and then cut it. With the long strips like this, it's even harder to prevent it from curling back in on itself. They are also hard to place because no matter how hard I try, I never place them perfectly, and they veer off in a direction as I smooth it down. Off camera, I'm adjusting the edges of the piece I just placed. I fold them over on the edge and use the hard scissor handle to smooth out the tape. And I just repeat this process. When placing this tape, take care. It can get major creases in it and I can never really get them out. If you do need to take the tape back up, just take it slowly and gently. It's useful when unrolling the tape to peel it off against the object you're taping. This makes it easier to unroll straight and smoothly. I attempt to do the edges first, since I think that makes it look better than leaving them for last. I debated doing the underside of the top plate since it's supposed to be unseen. I decided at this point not to tape it and move on to the bottom of the gauntlet. I'll later reverse that decision. Since I did such a good job gluing the edges of the bottom piece down, I can't get the tape around the edge. It looks like crap, but luckily it's an area that theoretically isn't seen. So there's nothing really I can say at this point. It's just rinse and repeat. While I'm doing this, I'm listening to the Critical Hit D&D podcast, and it's pretty cool. Oops, a piece is too short. This is why I keep the scraps. Rubbing out the folds is a never-ending battle. I always notice more of them that I didn't see before. I don't think new ones form, but I just keep finding folds. More scraps to keep and a few used to cover up a gap. And now I've changed my mind about taping the other side of the top. I refuse to let the tape from the other side fold up onto the top. That would just look bad. Plus, when I taped the top, I intentionally made the pieces long enough to wrap around the edge, so that any piece of the bottom wouldn't need to be that long. So, despite all the rolling I did earlier, the top plate has unrolled. It sucks, but I have an idea of how to deal with it. Almost done! I tossed the glove on to make sure it all worked well together. And of course, I find more folds to smooth out. So the prototype's done. I definitely had a better experience with this than the plastic bag on my arm experiment, so this was definitely a better choice. But I am rather pleased. In fact, I'm so pleased with this that I'm actually debating ditching the foam, because the foam is just rather thick. I mean, I was considering making each finger out of an individual piece of foam, so each finger would be that thick on a side, and then you'd have it on the other side of the finger as well. So therefore, the combined weight would be that much foam between each finger, and that's not good. So I considered simply cutting the foam. And I'm like, if I'm going to be cutting that much foam, is it even worth it? And when in actuality, I am rather satisfied with how well the cardboard is behaving with the aluminum tape. So I am highly debating whether or not I actually want to do it. If I were doing just the arm piece, I would be a little more considering of it. If I was doing a chest piece, I definitely would be using the foam, because for a chest piece, that amount of thickness is just fine. And even for the gauntlet, even on the parts where it's doubled up, it's still only that thick, which isn't horrible, but I think I like it better with the thin cardboard. So I'm debating just doing the cardboard for the whole thing, for the final version. And if I did, I definitely would want to follow the papercraft instructions better than I did on these guys to avoid the holes in the fingertips and the general ugliness of it. Although I did also have another thought that if I wanted to fix these holes, I could take a piece of scrap, slap it over the hole, and that would be a rather easy way to fix that little hole. And speaking of the tape, man, I'm sure I mentioned it during the commentary, but I am kicking myself about having forgotten to put the tape on the cardboard before I glued it to the sock. That was a dumb mistake on my part. I mean, it made it so that the edges on here are looking like crap for some of them because I couldn't get the tape around the edge. But I'm almost assured that I won't make that mistake again. For articulation, this thing is actually pretty darn good. I think I did a good job of sussing out my needs. I've got a little bit of issue doing this with my wrist, but that's primarily caused because of the thick glove this is on, interacting with the cardboard, interacting with the gauntlet. The rather tight glove that I'm going to be doing for the final version hopefully won't have that issue, and I don't expect it to. So that shouldn't be too big of an issue. This direction of hand movement, I am just fine on. I can shake hands with the best of them in this thing. Well, at least, wrist movement. Elbow, when I hold the thing down to prevent it from hitting my arm, is pretty darn good. Not perfect. It does, at the very height of it, it does kind of dig into my arm a little bit, but nothing that I'm concerned about. I can definitely feel it. I am satisfied with it. I definitely needed this length of the top bit, so I will imitate this top bit versus my other versions of the top piece. And speaking of the top piece, I think for the final version I'm going to pick up some Velcro, some sticky Velcro that I'll put in a couple spots on this to Velcro down the top piece, because I want the top piece to be a separate piece so that it can flex when I pull my arm out. If I didn't have the top piece be free, the wrist section here would be too tight for my hand to get through. So I needed the top piece to be its own separate piece so that it could flex as I pull my hand out. But for when I'm in the costume, I do want it to be solid, tight against or tighter against the bottom piece. So Velcro would allow both of those situations to happen, and isn't necessarily seen when it's done right. So I'm going to investigate that. I keep forgetting to bring it up, but the shininess of this material can be dulled down with some steel wool for a camera. In person, it all looks, rather fine. In fact, I took some steel wool to the top piece already, and you might be able to tell the difference between the top piece and the back of the hand. In person, I can see some marks from it, but it's nothing really bad. I mean, I glance at it and see metal. It's also the bottom I didn't do that with either. So just to do it on camera, I just do this. Whee! And it just dulls it slightly. You can do it for a little bit longer than that, probably. But that's what I did. For the final version, I probably will go over it all with with this stuff, steel wool, to make it a little bit duller before I paint it with the red paint. If I do go through with the cardboard and aluminum tape thing. I'm also rather surprised with this how much super glue it took. I mean, I went through almost 2 entire little bottles of super glue, and I don't ever use it that fast anywhere. So I'm considering for the next version to use hot glue for wide areas and the super glue for precision areas. I think a combination of the two might be a good solution. That way I can get it all secure. Like this bottom piece only has super glue. It is only glued in a couple places, and I'd like it to be glued all over. That makes it stronger because I don't want to have to worry about something falling off when I'm wearing it at a convention or something. So using super glue, or using hot glue, I'd be able to glue a whole lot more area of it, and theoretically it would be stronger. So how does this thing feel on my arm? The comfort level of it actually is a little warm, but that's partially probably because I'm wearing cotton or wool or whatever fabric this is. And it's a rather hot day today, so it's quite likely because of that. So hopefully the other glove, hopefully this glove will be a little bit easier to survive, but it's not bad. I wouldn't really have too much of an issue wearing this for many hours a day. So I think that works fine. So the theoretical next steps for this would be adornments, would be me aesthetic things, like I would take a piece of scrap before, I'd take a piece of scrap and like over the top here, I'm going to take basically half plate of this and over every single knuckle do a half circle, well not half circle, but a little bit deeper than that, indentation of it. So it'll add that effect. On the top piece here, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do. Probably like a strip or something going down. My goal is to make this not look like it's a rock bell piece of Automail, because the character I'm building in my mind has never met a rock bell. I'm going to pull up pictures of Automail from other characters in the series and see how that looks and kind of take my aesthetic cues from that. One thing I already did notice is that a lot of the pieces of Automail have this rectangular notch on every finger joint to try and imply that they are connected by a couple pieces or something. I didn't want to do that because this specific spot right here at the tip of the finger joints is where I'm gluing the fingers together, and that is gluing the fingers to the gloves, and that is like the perfect spot for this. So I didn't want to mess with that. What I'm thinking I'm going to do is take a piece of scrap and make small little rectangles out of the scrap and have it be an elevated piece as opposed to a recessed piece. So that hopefully will work. And as long as I'm looking at the fingers, there's one thing I want to point out that I screwed up on. Like specifically, it's this finger, so I'm going to keep an eye on this when I do this in the final version. For this joint, I placed it correctly and glued it correctly, but for the other two, the glove ended up getting turned. So the orientation of the joints is asymmetrical when the glove itself is in a natural stance. So whenever I put the glove on, I shift these pieces over, but now the finger is skewed, is rotated. So I had to fight the glove with that basically. So I'm going to keep an eye on that when I do this version of it. Overall, I'm rather glad that I experimented with this as a test to see how this worked, because I learned some very valuable lessons doing this. I hope you guys had some enjoyment out of this as well. And I think it's going to make the next version of this even better, having done one already. The aluminum tape worked very well. In fact, it's one of the main reasons why I'm considering abandoning the phone, because I have some concerns that the spray paint I bought isn't going to be as shiny, it isn't going to be as metallic as the aluminum tape has been. Yeah, I didn't really do a good job with the taping of the top, so the design on it, because of the tape, looks bad. And also it looks bad because of the fact that I was doing a seam down the center and just using scrap cardboard that I had laying around. I wasn't really caring too much about how it was going to look other than general shape. But the aluminum tape worked fantastically, so the tape works so well that if you were trying to mimic me, I would definitely recommend the aluminum tape. It is hands down a really awesome prop tool. So thanks to Adam Savage for that tip for me. I mean, look at this. This looks like it's metal. I have some issue with the seams, but nothing huge. I am concerned about one thing, though. The amount of space here at the wrist, it's kind of big. So I'm concerned about how that's going to look in the final black glove version. I am considering grabbing some wire and having some wire go from underneath one plate to underneath the other plate. I'm not sure how that's going to look, or if it's even going to fit the aesthetic style, but it's something I'm considering. I've also considered just having a plate that's like maybe curved or something. I don't know. Maybe something like this. I don't know. There's some options there that if I really wanted to do something about this potential huge gap, I could. But I think I'm going to wait and see the final version before I make that decision. Because adding some wire underneath the plates is not going to be a difficult thing to do. I'll just make sure that when I'm gluing these edges, not to do it super... Well, this edge is already going to be easy to do because it's not going to be connected to the glove at all. But overall, I am quite pleased with how this has turned out. I think I've got a very good design. I've got a very good battle plan for how I'm going to do this. I've got the pitfalls that I need to watch out for. And I think this is going to turn out well, I hope anyway. So, thank you for joining me on this next step of the adventure. I will try to film the next step. I hope you found something entertaining. I hope you found something interesting that you liked. And I'm glad to have shared this process with you guys as I continue to experiment with making a armored gauntlet, essentially. And yeah, this process is looking pretty good. See you guys.